Welcome to the Mindcraft podcast. My name is Kimberly Quinn, and I am here with the lovely, the wonderful Jim Stutz, my dear friend from our mastermind group, and also a retired middle school, junior high, I think he says, junior high
Yes.
school teacher, lover of literature, and also one of the key topics that Jim and I share interest in is, well, authenticity and this sort of epidemic of disconnection going on in the United States, at least right now. And so Jim is going to pick up with episode 5, based on Bronne Ware's book, The Five Regrets of the Dying, right? And I'm going to let
Yeah.
him tell you, after our big welcome, what the most popular regret is. Now, if you have not watched the other 4 episodes, I would strongly encourage it because they're really good, based on some essays Jim has done. They're just really fabulous. I would strongly encourage you to go do that. So, welcome, Jim. We are so glad to have you back on the Minecraft podcast.
I'm so glad to be here. It's always fabulous to be here and have these conversations with you.
I'm just so excited. So, this one, I have to tell you, Jim and I have talked about it a bunch on and off camera, and it still gives me the chillsies up my neck because it's just tragic, I think, to have to be at the end of one's life, and I'll let him tell you what it is. The most common regret of all of the 5 was what, Jim? Can you get us going?
The, the most common of the 5 regrets is I wish I had had the courage to live a life true to myself and not the life others expected of me.
I mean, wow. Imagine, I mean, I don't even want to imagine living to a
Mhm.
ripe 75, 80 years old. You've gone through the motions, through all those life minutes, all that potential joy. I mean, tell us maybe the back, she wrote this from her own experience, right? Where, like, what's
Yes.
happening with this? Do people go through their whole life with a facade?
Yeah, it is a facade. There's a little blurb connected to this particular regret. And it says that when people realize that their life is almost over and look back clearly on it, it's easy to see how many dreams have gone unfulfilled. Most people had not honored even a half of their dreams and had to die knowing that it was due to choices they had made or not made. And I think that's maybe the part that weighs heavily on people is realizing like at some point when we're adults and we have more agency, that we still made a choice or failed to make a choice to do things that might have been more fulfilling with our life minutes, as I love the term that you use.
Yeah, so basically, I think there are layers here, and Jim has 3 essays which I read prior to this, and they're all really, really good. And there's some different layers because there's a play it safe component, I think.
Yeah.
There's a
Hmm.
conformity component, and maybe even a
Yeah.
fear component. You want to
Hmm.
take that and run with it? Because that's a lot.
Yes. I think it probably starts with, well, I think it probably starts with fear when we're children. And um, there's often a common experience that we have when we're 5, 6, or 7 years old. And it's the first time we experience something where we do something out of the freedom of being a child that someone disapproves of, and we're
Mm-hmm.
scolded for it in some way. And suddenly we feel like there's something wrong with us, and we don't ever want to feel that way again. And so we start to conform to the types of behaviors we think that the people around us, especially people of authority, our parents and our teachers and things of that nature, we start to conform to the behaviors we think they want from us so that we can have their acceptance. And so we start to slowly shed the purity of who we were before that moment. And so there's a fear of rejection. There's a fear that if I continue
Right.
to be that person that I was 5 minutes ago before I got yelled at,
Right.
I won't be loved. And so there's fear and conformity there. And then the play it safe. I think you nailed all three of those. I think those are all operating at the same time.
Hmm.
And of course, as we get older and we move into our different social groups, especially in adolescence,
Hmm.
I saw this many, many times teaching that age group. Conformity and gaining acceptance from your peers becomes paramount. It doesn't matter to many of kids in that age group if what they're doing gets them in trouble from their parents, their teachers, their coaches, whatever, if it gains them acceptance from their peers.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so again, there's like not focusing on who they really are, but rather fitting in to survive and gain acceptance and approval.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think developmentally speaking, that especially for preteens and teens up through college, because their prefrontal cortices aren't fully developed yet either, the traditional age, right? Especially the younger ones, though, Jim. I feel like the need to be accepted. Acceptance is like catnip almost. They
Yeah.
just chase it because it's they need it like breathing oxygen, so they think
Yes. Yes. Yes.
developmentally. Well, it also has me thinking of Don Miguel Ruiz's Four Agreements when he talks about how we learn to act at such a young age. I don't mean Broadway, I mean
Yeah.
similar, I
We
guess.
perform.
But this, yeah, to
Yeah.
perform, exactly, masks, I picture masks covering us up, a facade,
Yeah.
and we learn for the reasons you're saying to mask up and to act because children are dependent on our parents for our very survival, right? So I'm learning how to get the good feels from people, and I'm performing to get the good feels.
Yeah. There's that, but I like speaking in my case, I didn't even get the good feels, but it was an attempt to at least avoid more of the bad
Bad
ones,
feels, right, right, right.
you know. Even though there wasn't a lot of the good stuff, but at least it was neutral at best,
Hmm.
you know.
Hmm.
Um, and that led to, all kinds of choices which were not conscious, to do things, go in directions that were not really in alignment with who I was or who I would have the things I would have chosen had I a greater sense of self and the confidence to be that person.
Yes, I don't know if you want to share that or not, Jim, but in one of your essays, I'll leave this open ended here just in case you don't want to share it, but you kind of spoke of how you sort of survived that when you were a little boy, with doing some different tasks. I don't know if you want to share that or not, because otherwise we can just
Hmm.
elaborate in a general sense.
Yeah. No, as a child, I was very creative,
Yeah.
when left to my own devices, and very introverted, very quiet, very sensitive. And, none of these things were valued in my
Hmm.
home
Hmm.
growing up. And so I either felt like I was invisible, getting no kind of attention or feedback or criticism. So that's kind of what I was getting at a moment ago by saying, like, in the absence of having good feelings, I was trying to at least avoid more of the
Bad
negative
feeling.
ones
Right, right, right.
by adapting my behaviors when I was around parents and adults, especially because so many people didn't know what to make of a young, sensitive, quiet, creative child, and so I often felt like there was something just really not right about me because of the way the people around me responded. And that, set up decades of adaptive behaviors that were just intended to try to gain approval from parents, coaches, teachers, bosses, girlfriends, wives, down the line, and just at some point completely lost track of like who I really was.
No, and that's so honest. I thank you for your courage with that. And here's the thing, Jim. I think we both know, sadly, how all too common this is.
Mm.
And maybe possibly the farther back you go, the more common, because people weren't as expressive the farther back you
Yeah.
go. But putting kids in boxes, genderizing too, the farther back you go, sensitivity might not be as accepted for I don't know, and that's not okay, right? And we learn, or just like a girl child being assertive or something.
Mm.
Maybe she
Yeah.
wants to run for office in the future, but don't do that. Be a lady.
Right.
There's a
Yeah.
whole other side to that, right?
Hmm.
And I'm thinking that, when, like you're saying, when you're growing up like this and you're crammed into this little box of do this, be that box, what happens when that goes on for months and months and then years and then you're a young adult and then what happens to that child inside?
Well, in my case, I'm from my, reading and learning. Definitely a common experience for many people is that child just gets completely lost. It's still there somewhere, but we completely forget that it ever existed. At least I did. Um, and and that is the essence of who we are, right? Is the
Right.
things that lit that child up, whatever it was for that particular child, creativity or something scientific or cooking or athletics or whatever it was. And when we get a message that whoever that person is not welcome in this space, what is welcome is some other set of values or behaviors, then yeah, that child just gets buried alive, literally, and sometimes never to be heard from again. And even those of us that reach a point where we start trying to revive that child, it can be a long and painful journey to do that, but it's definitely worth the effort to slowly rediscover that flame that's still just kind of a little flicker now deep inside of you and try to rekindle it to remind yourself of who you are as a being, as a spirit, as an entity, and what it is you're meant to be doing with this life.
No, I love that because in this whole idea, and of course, as you're well aware, preteens, teenage and young adult depression is so, the rates are like, they're just
Yes.
huge. So when you said, literally, they're, literally dying too, when there's such a huge disconnect. Well, I know it's way more complicated than that with social media and everything else, which actually feeds what we're talking about. It's make
Yes.
pretend land, right? It's all a big
Yeah.
facade. So these kids who are so impressionable, if they're getting messages at home or from whomever, coaches, whoever, and then they spend on average, last I checked, it's probably worse now. It was 8 point something hours per day, not counting school, on a screen. Think about that times a week. That's a full-time job without a 401k or a days off. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I mean, it's just
Right.
and all that exposure to falsity.
Yeah.
Be this, do that, be this airbrushed with the friends, and you got into this school, and you got that job, and you're with a partner, and you're going into all the parties, and you're popular. If we throw that in there, what do you think this happening in this day and age, 2024, almost 2025, how do you think that may affect somebody being pulled away from their authentic self?
I think uh, it definitely does that, and it does it in probably the most potent way that it's ever been done, because just the more we know, I think we know enough now. I don't know how much more we could find out about the addictive power and psychological manipulation that goes into a lot of these platforms, social media platforms, and that, children under, or even adults now under a certain age, have grown up with these things, and it is the way they live. It's the way they interact with, well, I was going to say it's the way they interact with the world around them, but they're not really interacting with the world around them. They're interacting with these screens and these illusions of what life is or supposed to be, and just the sheer quantity of the exposure to toxic images and ideas about what you're supposed to look like and be and do in order to be somebody, from an earlier and earlier ages. I'm sure we've all been places in public and seen, not even children anymore, but toddlers being given screens.
Oh,
And
I can't even get started with that. Connected
yeah,
disconnection.
yeah. And so from a very, very, very young age, that programming starts, and it is programming that is being the result of being just stuck in front of these screens for so long. And I mean, even before that, I know there have been studies about the impact of media on television, on the brain, and its actual physiological development. And this is just all the social media and the technology that exists now is just taking all that to hyper levels that we're starting to understand, but we probably don't quite understand just how incredibly powerful it is in terms of its impact on what we're talking about. A young person or even an adult, on their perceptions of who they can be in this world, or what it would be acceptable for them to be in this world.
Right. And they're comparing themselves, most of the waking day, starting from young
Yes.
ages, like you're saying. And I know we were starting off, talking about creativity too, Jim. This has been a big conversation. I know I've been involved in a bunch, and I'm sure you have too, because children are naturally creative. We come into the world, and think of a 4 or 5 year old. They're out in the backyard making forts and castles and things out of
Mhm.
sticks and nothing. They just find a way
Yeah.
to do it. And I've noticed at a fabulous 59 for not much longer this week, that, we used to play longer. Like now
Mm.
if you were 12 and you were seen playing in the woods making a fort, people would talk in middle school, and it would be, socially horrible for you. We were younger longer, we played longer, because there were no cell phones or no anything like that. Now, I know just from people I'm talking to, you don't even find kids out in the neighborhoods. They're all either inside on screens, or they're booked up by parents, like scheduled with a million different things. No more pickup games. So I'm wondering, with this white space, this natural outside, now we'd say white space. To us, it was just normal, right? You're outside playing flashlight tag, so without that natural, just free, available time to be creative, what do you think sort of the repercussions of that? I mean, even for like society, individual, both. I guess the question's both, twofold.
Yeah. Well, I think it's huge on both levels, the individual and societal. Because in my experience with younger people these days, see them really struggling with creativity, even if it's just the creativity to have an open-ended conversation, or they're given a simple task and say, here, do this however you want it. And they just kind of freeze up because they've rarely, if ever, been given a chance to just do something completely at their own whim
Mm-hmm.
and of their own will, because as you mentioned with the overscheduling, and part of that is just this constant hovering over them by parents and authority figures, and this environment we've created where there's no risk anymore. Like
Yeah. Oh,
everything has to be so
yes.
sterilized and so ultra safe. And, that's part of the thrill of childhood and adolescence is having the freedom, or we used to just go out and be on our own and play and have fun and be free to explore. And yeah, sometimes you got hurt. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then you just learned how not to do that again.
You don't take
But it,
choice.
it
Yeah.
yeah, but that gave you there's a creativity in that freedom. And so like I said, now like children are so regulated from birth even up to college, and I'm sorry.
No
Um,
worries.
um, from birth to college and probably beyond. And I just see like they're really just uncomfortable when they're just given over something and said, "Here, you do what you want with this."
Mm-hmm.
And they just don't. I think they're terrified they're going to make the wrong choice or something. And then so blowing that up larger picture societally, when you have an entire generation or two that don't feel like they can take a chance or take a risk or be self-guided. And where does that leave us? I mean, as a society, when they don't feel like they can just explore and try things. And where does that leave us in terms of innovation in any field, scientifically, creatively? And there's so many restrictions on what you can do and what you can't do, and they're so overloaded with all of these rules
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
it just it doesn't lead to the kind of things that humanity has experienced in the past. Like, President
Thinking of the
Kennedy just saying,
Renaissance. Yeah.
yeah, oh, the Renaissance is a perfect example. And I was just going to use the example of President Kennedy saying we're going to go to the moon by the end of the decade, and we have no idea how we were going to make that happen. But just
Right.
having that
Right.
kind of spirit to say we're going to try something amazing, we don't know even how we're going to make it happen.
But we're gonna do it.
I don't. Yeah, and I don't see a lot of that kind of vision these days.
Well, it's interesting you just brought up a space example because I that came into my head. That's what I jotted down real quickly when you said something that inspired me, because I think many of us often picture creativity as painting on a canvas, sculpture, writing music, writing essays, and that's all true. And of course, one of the biggest ways creativity expresses itself is problem solving. I was thinking of the
Yes.
movie, well, it actually happened, but Apollo 13, when they had
Hmm.
this long to get all that put together with not much. And
Right.
the brains that did that then, I'm not so sure that task would be accomplished as easily
Hmm.
now because, and you and I talked about earlier about all the standardized tests, and I know we talked about Massachusetts and the MCAT. Of course, there are other states too. They just teach. I picture stormtroopers like just these just robotic thinking.
Yes. Yes.
Where are we going? Like you said, I'm thinking space comes to my mind because I think of that's such a an unpioneered frontier, right? Well, where are we going with drone-like minds?
Yeah, absolutely. It shows up in so many facets of our lives. Me being a big person, like you mentioned, about literature, and I love film and all things artistic, and I wonder the same thing you just mentioned, like about I can't it's so hard for me to find newly made films or television shows that have any kind of real heart or soul or
Oh,
creativity to them.
yeah.
They're just, I think we're at a cultural low in all those fields: music, modern popular music. I'm not saying this as like I'm an old guy and back in my day it was better. I mean, I would love to hear some vital new music, but I'm not hearing it. And there's such a, I think, a pressure now to create just the most homogenous product that they can in hopes that it will appeal to, not just an American audience if it's an American product, but globally. That's all they really care about. Let's make it homogenous so that it'll appeal to every culture, and therefore it can't be adventurous, it can't be original. And I,
Exciting.
so that's to me, that's the thing I bump up against the most frequently because those are the things that I look for in my life most regularly. But I do see that lack of creativity and originality in films and TV shows and music, especially that's produced by people that are probably under 50.
No, it's true. I don't watch a lot of TV. I do like movies. I don't watch a lot of TV, and some of these when I've caught glimpses of sitcoms, it's almost insulting to the like intelligence because
Yeah,
there's not much of a plot. There's no depth. I mean, I'm not saying every single show out there. I don't watch a lot of shows, but
sure.
it's not I Love Lucy, which is
Right.
the longest running. I'm a big fan, and
Brilliant show.
yes, and they didn't have to use language. There's no language. There's no violence. She's
Hmm.
just funny, and I agree with you that it's and also music wise, you're a musician. I'm not at all. But I do know that way back in the day, it says that because without the technology and you can be able to change everything they can change now, you actually had to have a ton of talent because you couldn't just push a few buttons and I don't have the right terminology you would, Jim, but
No,
to
yeah,
just
you're
change
right
it.
on. Yeah.
And then the other thing was I was thinking, so creativity, the Apollo 13 example came up, which is big for society, but also creativity, how it expresses itself in a conversation. Whether there's
Hmm.
somebody being kind of challenging in the conversation, you're trying to politely navigate around that person, or somebody incredibly interesting and you're trying to balance the conversation. There's all kinds of ways that I think those skills are perhaps being snuffed out a bit.
Yeah, absolutely think you're right. It's reflected throughout our culture and throughout our society in all these different ways. And so when we've come that far, where like that is the what our system is producing, our educational system, our societal norms is producing that. To go back to your kind of the root question is, yeah, I mean and this is happening at a younger and younger age, so we've never really in our society pushed the idea of self-discovery and self-examination and following your heart in that way. But I think we're farther away from that now than we probably ever have been.
No, I
Because
a 100%
it's
agree.
an unknown quantity. It can be a little dangerous, right? Like not physically dangerous necessarily, but it's adventurous, it's unknown, it's uncertain. And thank goodness for those people who have taken those risks in the past. And not everyone's going to succeed at it, but at least they took a shot. And those who did succeed, have left behind great innovations, whether it was like you mentioned, in aerospace and
Hmm.
air space travel,
Medicine.
medicine, art, science, all of these things. I mean, there is always somebody with a crazy idea, you know, probably being told like, I don't, what are you crazy? We can't do that. Or it's never been done before. And somebody had a vision and
And just made like
the
the Wright brothers.
enthusiasm.
Yeah,
Yes,
that's just
yes.
one example.
Yeah,
How many
yeah.
times they were told, "You are you nuts? You can't fly a plane."
Yeah, and how many times they tried it anyway and still crashed, but they just kept going back to the drawing board, you know?
They kept going,
And
and I think science too. Like people don't often think of science as creative, but you think of the Wright brothers. That's physics. And also
yeah,
I just thought of it now, Jim. One of my favorite professors. I loved to nerd out with him. It was physiology, and his private research project. This was way back in the '80s. Was he studied newts, little salamanders, and he studied
uh-huh.
regeneration of limbs. And some
Mm,
kids thought he was nuts. I thought it was so cool. Imagine if somebody who lost their leg from diabetes or a car accident, they were under a microscope, he was doing all this. If that isn't creativity, he's trying to figure out they can do it. A salamander can regrow a limb. Why can't we? Like we
right.
can, we just don't know how yet.
Hmm. Yeah, creativity is not just artistic, you know, it has so many expressions in every conceivable field. And that's, I think, you know, the theme that we've been talking about here, that how that has been lost,
Mm-hmm.
um, you know, because we've more than ever, we're training our young people not to take risks and
Mm-hmm.
to, you know, there's only one path to success, and it lies through, you know, taking all these AP courses in high school and taking the SAT and going to these schools and all this stuff. And that is not the path for everybody. And
No, and it doesn't have to be.
no,
Right? And
no.
there's even fake rocks under the swings now. And not that I want
Yeah,
a child get. We used to we go swing way up high, and then but you learned, you jumped off, you got a knee full of gravel, little things, and
yeah,
then you didn't, or maybe you did it twice. You probably didn't do it 5 times. I mean, you would
right.
gradually
Yeah,
learn. Don't do that.
right. Yeah, and I mean, you got a scrape or two. I mean, it was no big
You're
deal,
okay,
you know.
right?
Yeah, and your parents probably said, "Well, you probably learned a lesson. Go play, you know, go play again." Yeah, but we become so risk averse, and I see the impact it's having on young people and how anxious they are because of it. Like I think
Mm-hmm.
they're just
Oh,
so overcome
yes.
with anxiety that, you know, they're going to make a mistake and it's going to cost them huge, and they won't get into some program that they've been told that they need to get into, and you know, that's just not the way to encourage people to live a life true to themselves.
Now that was very well said because I mean, it's kind of cliche to say anything in life takes a risk, whether that's being mutually vulnerable in a healthy relationship to get to that place of knowing each other's dreams and fears and, where it's in that, or it's starting a business, or it's, if you play it safe, you might be satisfied, but are you filled with joy?
Yeah.
Those are two different
Yeah,
levels.
absolutely. And you know, in our society, we've kind of, you know, always pushed the play it safe route. And perhaps that's true in other societies as well. But the play it safe route just doesn't lead to fulfillment for most people, you know.
No.
And not that, and there, man, there can be a middle ground. I mean, maybe you do, you know, you feel more comfortable taking the play it safe route as far as career goes and things like that, but that doesn't mean you still can't leave room for your own creative expression, again, whatever that is, whatever your interests are, whether they're scientific
Right.
or artistic or athletic. And hopefully that, if you get married and have children, you would also include that in the formula of raising them, your children, is, that there should always be an element of adventure and fun and doing things just for the joy of it.
Just for the joy. And then there's the whole courage piece. I know Brene Brown talks a lot about this, that
Mm,
taking that risk, just showing up, deciding to show up and not knowing, because you and I, you're in the track of speaking too, I think. And when you show up and you don't know how it's going to go, that's courage. Brene Brown says if you show up, you go out on the stage or fill in the blank with another way to show up. And if you know what's going to happen or what's probably going to happen, that's not courage. It's
right.
that leap of faith. You're like I don't know, like you were saying, we're going to go to the moon. I don't know how yet. JFK, right?
Mm,
If it's something like
right.
I'm going to start a business and I can kind of have a little vision, of helping people feng shui their space and be more mentally healthy. Don't quite know what
Mm.
it's going to look yet, but I'm taking the leap into it because I'm being pulled by high octane passion. That's what saddens me is I see people shutting the door on that, and I think that's tragic myself.
Yeah, and the way you phrase that is, something that I mentioned in some of the essays that I wrote is that whole thing about feeling, honoring is a good word, honoring those powerful feelings inside of us, because I think we all have them.
Yes.
That, I always wondered what it would be like, or I always wanted to try whatever it was, starting a business or growing a garden or making a painting, whatever it is. And just, yeah, granting yourself the freedom to give it a try.
Hmm.
And it doesn't have to be in public. And that's kind of what we're talking about in this last one is, people not even giving themselves that kind of grace and opportunity for joy. And I love that they use the word honoring in the opening about
It's a
how
good word.
most people had not honored even a half of their dreams. And I think that's a powerful word, to honor that which is calling from within us,
Hmm. Hmm.
and and just letting it lead us, and again, it doesn't have to be we have to leave everything behind and just follow that, but we shouldn't ignore it either. We need to explore it because there's a reason it's bubbling up inside of you. And I think this is, it's been true in my life, and it's something I've read and come across in so many other places, is we all have something like that that won't go away. Maybe we quiet it down for a little while, but the same voice or the same urge keeps recurring.
Hmm.
And there's a reason for that. And I just can't imagine ignoring that for an entire lifetime and not at
Oh,
all just taking a look at it and saying, let's explore this a little bit.
honestly, that says depression to me, is what it says. And I'm thinking of Julia Cameron's Artist's Way, and it just came into my head this minute. I was reading that back in my 30s, and it's great with writer's block. It's great with any kind of block with the art.
Yeah.
But she also goes on to say, like, we can stuff it down. Let's say it's somebody's been yearning to write a children's book, and
Hmm.
it's so these feelings are so strong, and she or he, they're constantly saying, "Oh, after this, after that, I got to work. Now I'm tired. I worked all day." And and then a week runs into a month, runs into years. She also says that the universe is knocking at your door. Like, let's say it's J.K. Rowling with Harry Potter. She answered the door. She was homeless and
Hmm.
open to it, right? But
Yeah.
at a certain point, the universe will ask somebody else too. According to that's how
Hmm.
she looks at it. It keeps if it goes on and goes on and goes on, or like you said, it just snuffles and just has a like dies. Either way is a tragedy.
Yes. It's a tragedy for the person who sacrifices themselves in that way. And it's a tragedy for all the people who could have benefited if that
Hmm.
person had expressed that desire.
Yes. I mean, think about if it were F. Scott Fitzgerald or just name anybody who did something incredible, you know what I mean? Or
Yeah.
just name any of them, any of the
Yeah.
musicians, you're a musician, or I also love literature like you do, and the paintings and all of it. And Grandma Moses, who didn't get started until her 70s,
Mm.
with her paintings. And so that brings me to you had a lovely quote in here. I'm a big Aristotle fan,
Mm.
actually,
Hmm.
because I love how he's so focused on virtue and talents and all things authentic. And Aristotle wrote, "Where your talents and needs of the world cross, there lies your vocation."
Mm.
I thought maybe you could touch on that, Jim. It's like as far as your
Sure.
calling.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's so precisely put and so simply put by Aristotle. Where your talents and the needs of the world cross, there lies your vocation. And our talents, again, that's what we should be nurturing in our children, and from the time they start to develop and express their own natural talents. And again, that doesn't mean necessarily artistic. It maybe that you have a child who's just brilliant with science or nature, or or athletics, whatever their particular gifts are. And we need to, they don't even need to be coaxed necessarily. It's that they're present. And as a child needs to be encouraged to express those things. And then it's,
Hmm.
as I've said before, it's our responsibility as their parents, teachers, coaches to nurture those things in a healthy way,
Hmm.
so that they still remain fun and creative. When a person's much older than we do it these days, then we can get more serious. Like if they're still really passionate about something by
Hmm.
the time they're in high school, okay, then let's maybe look at some more rigorous study of that thing or a more rigorous program. But we have to still let it just simmer and percolate and marinate, and because those things change over time as well.
Hmm.
But that's what I think youth should be about, is just letting these talents have free expression. And once a child is at an appropriate age, then sort of developing one or two of those in a more serious way, with the idea that this is who you are as a human being. These are the elements that make up you. These are your natural gifts. And what a better thing to do than to help a young person find ways to make those talents his or her vocation, to contribute and make the world a better place. And the world could simply be their own community or their own family. It doesn't have to mean you have to change the world, of course. But, imagine if our world were filled with young people who grow into older people who have been encouraged to nurture their own God given talents
Right.
for the good of those around them. I mean, everybody benefits from that.
Everybody
Everybody
benefits.
feels wonderful when those of us that have been lucky enough to experience it, one of our talents, we've had the opportunity to use it and contribute it to others, and we see a positive impact from that. And it's, on the rare occasions maybe that those people that have been on the receiving end of our talents let us know what it meant to them or how it impacted
Hmm.
them, that just makes us want to do it again. And the people on the receiving end of it, their lives are impacted in a positive way, and maybe they'll be inspired to find their own talents and then contribute. And it just creates this ripple effect. So that's what I think of when I read that Aristotle quote is, helping young people. And for those of us that didn't get that kind of nurturing as younger people, it's not too late. We talked earlier about going
Hmm.
back to sort of revive that inner child that possesses those talents and starting to nourish those again and give ourselves permission to start to walk down that path. And when we take a couple steps toward it, it takes a couple steps toward us. And suddenly,
I love that.
you know, people start showing up in our lives who are compatible with this new pursuit. And that can become the next stage of our development because we've now got a new mentor or a new supporter. And, when we are operating from those places, then magic happens.
Oh, 100%. And I think it comes down to, playing it safe versus, chasing your bliss. It's chasing your bliss and then being in what we call the flow zone, right? Because playing it safe is not going to lead you to the actual flow zone. I'm thinking of the work by
No.
Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, like the actual when you lose, like when you're for you making music or writing, right? Where you start writing and then all of a sudden our music, you look out the door now it's dark. Like where'd that time go? And you
Right.
lose track of yourself and you in a good way, and whatever that
Yes.
is for the person. But flow is not going to happen in the box,
No.
and it's not going
No.
to happen, because the inner voice drives the flow zone. So
Yes.
the pursuing the bliss, and you have another quote in here. Bliss is that deep, fulfilling, sustainable, driving need you have, that thing that is the true you. Your bliss is your life's purpose. Your bliss gives your otherwise meaningless life meaning. My handwriting is horrible. That came from the Wisdom website.
Yes.
Um, oh, just fantastic to actually chase your bliss.
Yes. Yeah. And I think,
That's,
that bliss again is present. The seeds of it are present
mm-hmm,
anyhow
mm-hmm.
in childhood as, you know, we go about again, in previous generations, if you had the freedom to just play expansively and
Mm-hmm.
to experiment and explore and try different things, and you find your just things start to come out. Things emerge from you
Mm-hmm.
that are different, that are the things that are emerging from other children, and those are the seeds of our bliss. I mean, we wouldn't, those things couldn't come out of us if they weren't part of
Right, part of who we are.
our wiring or our,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and so, I mean, what could be better than to be guided to live your life from that, out of that garden of joy, and you then contribute that joy to everybody around you, and they would be inspired to find their own bliss. And I just think that's what life is. That's why we're here, in this lifetime is
100%.
to find those things and to develop them and to contribute them. It's all a package.
And I love that, Jim. And it doesn't have to be. And I'll ask people when I'm doing whatever, how do you like your job? And no matter if you're a barista, actually, Simon Sinek talks about a barista he met once. This kid, just young man, just loved. He was just lit up all day long. Time
Yeah.
flew, everything, because he was living in the flow zone. And I actually asked my dentist years ago. He was a new one. He was kind of young. I said, "How do you like what you do?" And he said, "I love what I do." And he talked about when he was a teenager, he had some kind of genetic something, like in his teeth. And he said he was always embarrassed to smile and always like
Mhm.
this. He said, "I am filled up over the top." These are like his words,
Mhm.
filled up over the top every day. Not that you can have a bad few minutes. And he said, kept saying it over and over. I love what I do. Well, you were saying how it benefits other people. He's a dentist. That's
Yeah,
benefiting lots of people. If you're coming in with his big, huge smile, he's good at it, and he's happy to be there.
yeah,
You
yeah,
don't have to be in the
and
Peace Corps.
right, right. Yeah, and I mean, school is as well, I guess, there's more people being homeschooled now, but in the past, I mean, school is an experience that we all had, and we all know the difference between a teacher who had that approach, like
Yes. Oh,
your
definitely.
dentist, a teacher who was there because they couldn't do anything else. This was just what they were called to do,
Me too.
and a teacher who is there for other reasons and is clearly uninspired, and they leave you uninspired as a student. And I've had that experience. I've had classes I was really looking forward to because I liked the subject that were ruined. The class was, just
Yeah.
not any fun at all because the teacher didn't wasn't into it. And I've had the other experience where I took a class because I had to, wasn't my favorite subject, but the teacher was so lit up by it that I enjoyed it. I mean, it completely alters the experience of the people that are on the receiving end of the practitioner.
100%. It's such a mutual benefit. I know I taught for 14, well, actually, I'm still teaching a class, but for 14 years, and I used to fly across the classroom. I had them all in a semicircle, and I would get right there, and it was just so interactive. And I told them I had to watch the computer for the time because I would keep them till midnight. And they would just laugh like, Professor, because we were just like so in the zone, and
Yeah,
the class was
yeah,
just exciting, and hands were up, and it was like there isn't a drug out there that
no,
could have possibly made me any higher. Just not even possible.
yeah, yeah. And who doesn't want to be around somebody who loves what they do so much that it's just infectious? And tie this back to this regret of wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself. Imagine somebody who thought, from a younger age or maybe later one, I would really like to be a teacher like that, and they didn't. And then look at all
Oh,
the all that was lost because they didn't
oh,
allow
man.
themselves to become that teacher that they could have been like you in that classroom, lit up, from their spirit and making such a difference in the lives of others. And instead, they just did whatever else they did, and they didn't give them permission. Maybe in their family, being a teacher wasn't respected or whatever, so they just shoved it in the background and they forgot about it. But look at all that was lost in their own lives and in the lives they could have touched.
I can't, honestly, Jim, I can't imagine that. I cannot imagine not having that part of my life. I just can't. I mean, I used to
Yeah.
drive in to campus and be excited about like, wow, are we gonna have enough time? I want to do this too, but maybe then I have to wait till Thursday. And then on the way back in the Jeep, I'd be like, that one quiet student finally talked and she was so animated. I'm like, I was like, I stayed charged up on the way there, teaching and on the
Yeah.
way home. I can't imagine, feels like I'm like losing a limb or something. I can't imagine not
Yeah.
having
Yeah.
not having that fulfillment. And then that's been 14 years. So think of roughly small college I was at, 20, well, not quite. Let's say 16-ish students per class, times three, times two per semester, six a year, times
Wow.
14 years.
That's a lot of lives touched.
And you did too as a middle school teacher. For how
Hmm.
many years?
Almost 20.
Wow, see?
Yeah.
And the
Yeah. And I
dentist,
had,
see?
yeah. Yeah.
Almost
And I had
20.
the same feeling about it as you did, and that's, what I still miss about it is the connection with the students and, helping them develop as human beings, um, completely aside from whatever the academic subject was.
Oh, totally.
And it was those connections that I'm sure you have this too. I mean, my very first class I taught was the 94-95 school year. We're coming up on 30 years from that point, and I'm still in touch with students and families from then. And I'm tremendously honored that that's the case.
Oh, totally.
That they would still, like, still want to have something to do with their eighth grade teacher,
That's
But I
super
mean,
remarkable,
it
actually.
is, and it's something that, at the end of my life, I can look back on and be proud of. And
That's quite a testament to you.
oh, thank you. But that's something I would wish for everybody,
Me
that
too.
they
For
be
whatever
able
your
to,
thing is, right?
whatever it is, the young man that's the barista. I mean, I love that example because I bring up things like that when I'm talking with people about this issue. And we mentioned it briefly earlier, that not everybody has to go to college and not everybody has to follow that path. I mean, if this young man gets such joy out of serving others in that way as a barista, then that's what he should be doing is or as soon as possible and for as long as possible, and maybe his interest will change someday. That's fine. But I would not encourage that young man to do anything like to say, well, that's is fine, but you still should go to college and you should still be an accountant or whatever, Like if he's doing something that lights him up so much,
Isn't that the goal? To have a
like,
joy-filled, fulfilling life?
I think so. I mean, I think if you ask,
If you're there, why would you, why would you, you know,
yeah, and I mean that level of joy outweighs whatever amount of money that he could be making doing something more lucrative. Because look at all the people who make plenty of money and who are miserable.
there's a lot of those.
There are a lot of those. And so, I mean, if I had the choice between making coffee and just being out of my mind happy all the time, or making $1 million doing something else that I don't like,
Sitting
I'll
on your
take the
yacht,
coffee.
lonely and miserable.
I'll take the coffee gig any day.
And he loved all the action about it. Simon, you can Google, you can probably find it, but he just went on, and he had a really positive work environment too. He loved everything about it. Couldn't wait to get there
Yeah,
every day. That to
yeah.
me is
That's the game.
that's
That's
the
the win.
game. That's
He
the game,
wins
and
the
it
game.
is. Could the one of the way we could wind up here, which is wonderfully natural, is that Jim had shared this with me. I believe it's anonymous, though. I don't think we have a. It's not doesn't have, it's not tagged to a person. It's never too late. Never too late to be who you might have been. So if you're in your 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, beyond, think Grandma Moses. I think you came up with another one we were talking about, Jim. Oh,
Oh, we talked
Louise Hay
Louise Hay. Yeah,
started her publishing house at 60
yeah.
ish,
Hmm.
and to really tap into that, so that you're not at the end of your your journey here on this planet with some big huge regret. To me,
Yeah,
that's I don't know if there's a worse thing.
yeah. I can't imagine that there would be much of one.
Well, this has been fantastic, and I want to thank our listeners for tuning in. If you've heard all 5 episodes, fantastic. If you haven't, I would strongly encourage you to go back and listen to the other 4 because they're all so good. Each one with a different regret. So good. Based on the book of Bronne Ware. I think she's Australian. I think
Yeah, I
so.
believe so.
And yeah, I think so. And I'd like to thank Mr. Jim Stutz for staying with us through 5 fantastic episodes. So thank you for your spending your life minutes with us, Jim. We're so happy that you did this series for us.
Thank you. It was a privilege and an honor.